of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I wish to congratulate you on your assumption of the presidency of the Security Council for this month. Our congratulations and thanks also go to our fellow ambassador of Lebanon for presiding ably over the business of the Council last month. Madam President, the unprecedented, aggressive language resorted by certain ambassadors against my country, against the political leaders of my country, facilitated my task today. For the discourse they came up with underscored what we have said and what other friendly ambassadors have said, namely that my country is targeted by our enemies in principle and not under any humanitarian pretext whatsoever. This aggressive discourse, Madam President, reveals the prejudice in certain Western capitals against my country, the political leadership of Syria, because of our independent political positions, independent from the agendas of those capitals, those very capitals. Madam President, on the 3rd of this month, 3rd of October this year, an armed terrorist group assassinated Sari Hassoun, the son of the General Mufti, a leading spiritual figure of the Syrian Republic, and Dr. Muhammad Omar, history professor at the University of Aleppo. A few days ago, precisely on the 29th of September, another armed group, terrorist group, assassinated Aus Abdel Karim Khalil, nuclear engineer and the dean of the University of Homs. 2 days before that, on the 27th of September, an armed terrorist group, a third one, assassinated Nail Adakhil, dean of the chemistry college at the University of Homs, as well as Muhammad Aqil, dean of the architecture college at the University of Homs. On the 25th of September, a fourth armed terrorist group assassinated Dr. Hassan Aid, head of the heart division at the National Hospital in Homs. All these crimes were committed during the same week. Unfortunately, they were added to the 800 officials in the army, in the police forces, and to a similar number of our civilian citizens who all were killed, and we are deeply saddened at that. The armed terrorist groups inaugurated a new epoch of terrorism, targeting the state the institution and the military, the universities of Syria, by assassinating our scientific, medical, educational, and spiritual leading figures. Despite this terrible hemorrhage of our homeland as a whole, my country, of whom I'm proud, my country, Syria, certain states that are leading the international campaign to intervene in Syria under the pretext of human rights and the protection of civilians, these countries continue to refuse continue to reject the existence of these terrorist groups in Syria for reasons that are known to all. Moreover, these states continue to protect and sponsor the leaders of these terrorist groups whom they host in their capitals. They continue to convene a conference after another where they declare to enter into dialogue with our government. Notably that these states are infamous for their black register in the fields of human rights and fundamental freedoms. I don't think that anybody ignores the massacres and human rights violations that were committed in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Algeria, and many African countries, in Iraq and Afghanistan, Libya as well, in the prisons of Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo, and secret prisons in Europe, just to state a few. We have stated previously that Syria is beleaguered by a two-faceted problem. The first facet is that the country really needs economic, political, and social reforms. Reforms that are called for by the masses and the country needs. And this is what we are striving to achieve. The second facet is the misuse by the needs of the masses for purposes that are diametrically opposed to the desires of the Syrian people. And the misuse of these needs as a ladder for the external opposition so as to stir sectarian commotion and pave the way for external intervention and for calling upon this external intervention. All of these are categorically rejected by the Syrian people, including by the honest domestic opposition. In this connection, certain parties inside the Security Council continue to implicate the Council in domestic Syrian affairs, which is a tremendous disservice to the rule of law and which runs counter, or rather, which is in the interest of certain agendas of those parties against Syria under unfounded pretext. And under the pretext of the maintenance of international peace and security, and not in the interest of the security and stability in Syria. We are astounded at this unobjective political trend that strives in an absurd and frantic manner to undermine stability, security, and coexistence in the whole region in general and in Syria in particular, with defamation to Syria and to its stature at the Arab, regional and international levels. These parties, time and again, abused of the Council as a cover-up for implementing their intervention in our domestic affairs. And even when these parties were faced by the desire of the remaining states on this Council to rise above these interventions, we noted that the former resorted to unilateral actions outside the framework of international legality to implement their political and military schemes. Hence, these parties exported outside the international legality NATO to many member states of this international organization to undermine its political stability, plunder their riches, and to spread the so-called creative anarchy therein. However, and this is a paradox, these parties only exported veto 50 times since 1945 to the Palestinians in order to deprive them of their legitimate rights and to prevent the establishment of their state. A particular state used the veto power 50 times to protect Israel, and it continues to threat the use of the veto power. This could be considered as partaking in a genocide, as this conduct is tantamount to turning a blind eye and supporting the Israeli massacres in occupied Arab lands, let alone the misuse of the developments in Syria to divert international public opinion away from the legitimate Palestinian demands to have a fully fledged membership within the United Nations. Madam President, the Syrian leadership responded quickly and immediately to the legitimate demands of the masses in Syria. President Bashar al-Assad announced a comprehensive package of reform, which our government is implementing by enacting a myriad of laws and legislation, enhancing the democratic process and expanding the participation of our citizens in the political and economic processes, in total isolation of the external evaluations and positions that have nothing to do with our domestic affairs.